The town of Lexington, which is nestled in the heart of South Carolina, traces its roots back to the early 19th century. It was named in honour of the Battle of Lexington and began as a modest agricultural community before blossoming into a thriving suburban area. Today, Lexington is a blend of old and new, where winding country roads meet bustling neighbourhoods and serene lakeside views give way to growing commercial districts. Sunset Boulevard, one of its main thoroughfares, stretches into the town, surrounded by wooded landscapes and a mix of small businesses and storefronts. Along this busy road, however, stands a house that feels out of place. At 5037 Sunset Boulevard, a grand colonial-style home is tucked amid the commercial bustle, standing as an odd relic of another era. But this house isn't just visually out of place. In 1990, something happened here that would forever change its place in the town's memory. One night, the quiet within its walls was shattered by a brutal crime, and the events of that evening would spark years of questions and division in Lexington. What truly happened behind the front door of 5037 Sunset Boulevard? Not just on that night, but in the years that preceded it. In the aftermath, profound questions were raised about justice, forgiveness, and the limits of both. As the town grappled with the tragedy, a single haunting question lingered in the air. Could anyone ever fully understand or forgive what had happened? It was just after midnight on the 13th of September 1990 when a security system company in Lexington, South Carolina, received a report. The alarm at the two-storey brick home at 5037 Sunset Boulevard had been blaring, but their attempts to contact the occupants were unsuccessful. The home belonged to Dorothy Mayfield, a 43-year-old mother of two daughters, 23-year-old Dana and 14-year-old Gina. Dorothy had remarried in the past year after her first husband, Charles, had died 3 years earlier from cancer. After failing to make contact, the security system company called the local police department. Around the same time, another call came through to 911. It was Gina Grant. After finishing a late shift at Lexington Medical Center, Dana had arrived back home to find both the front and back doors locked. She tried her key in the front door, but it wouldn't turn. Something was blocking it from the inside. Despite her repeated knocks, nobody answered. Her mother and sister should have been home, but the home remained dark and silent. Growing anxious and concerned, Dana had walked to the nearby Amoco garage and called the police. Minutes later, Officer Tim Darling was dispatched, and he picked up Dana on his way to the Mayfield residence. As they pulled up outside the dimly lit home, Officer Darling's headlights swept across the front garden, revealing a lone figure moving among the shadows. It was Gina, standing in the front yard, her face pale in the beams of light. She ran up to Dana, her voice shaking as she struggled to speak. She stammered that she had gotten into a fight with Mama, and that Mama was hurt. Officer Darling called for backup before stepping into the home. Just past the entryway, he discovered thick smears of blood marking the floor, as if something had been dragged through it. The trail led him into the kitchen, where shreds of clothing and more blood lay scattered across the floor. Red splatters dotted the refrigerator and the kitchen table. Detective John Phillips soon arrived on the scene. Recalling that night, he later described his initial impression. From the blood splatters on the refrigerator, the lack of blood on the floor concerned me. It seemed that there had been some sort of cover-up. The scene bore all the hallmarks of a brutal assault, yet the victim, presumably Dorothy, was nowhere in sight. Following the bloodstains, the detectives moved into the dining room, where a still, dark bundle lay on the floor. It was the lifeless body of Dorothy Mayfield. She lay in a puddle of blood, her head bearing deep, jagged gashes, and a knife protruded from her neck, with her hand loosely clasped around it. At first glance, it almost looked like a suicide, but the injuries on her head and the signs of attempted cleanup quickly ruled that out. Detective Phillips would later remark, "It was one of the most violent and vicious homicides I've ever seen." As the home was cordoned off with crime scene tape, forensic experts arrived to begin the meticulous process of documenting the scene. Every angle and detail of Dorothy's body was photographed before she was transported to the medical examiner's office. There, they confirmed that she had died from blunt force trauma. Dorothy had sustained at least 13 injuries to the head with some kind of heavy object. The knife had been stuck into her neck after she was already deceased. The examination also revealed defensive wounds on her right arm and left hand, injuries that had been sustained as she tried to protect herself from the relentless blows. Meanwhile, back at the home, forensic experts continued their investigation. Signs of an attempted cleanup were everywhere. Blood had been mopped up near Dorothy's body. Though a knife was embedded in her neck, it was clear that another weapon had also been used in the attack. Dorothy's head bore the brutal evidence of repeated heavy blows, likely from some kind of blunt object. As they expanded their search, detectives entered the bedroom of Dorothy's 14-year-old daughter, Gina. There, they noticed blood smudges on the handle of the closet door. When they opened it, they found a bloodied plastic bag. Inside, they uncovered a candle holder, coated in blood, and a few blood-soaked towels. As the investigation continued inside the home, detectives were already casting a suspicious eye on Gina. Her initial statement to her sister about a fight with her mother had raised questions, and her demeanour only heightened those doubts. While Gina appeared stunned by the horrific scene unfolding, Gina seemed almost energised, a palpable excitement coursing through her as if she were running on adrenaline. As detectives questioned her, they noted dry blood on her hands, feet, and clothing. Their suspicions intensified when forensic experts informed them of the bloody plastic bag found hidden in Gina's closet. With mounting evidence, Gina was promptly arrested at the scene, and the contents of the plastic bag were sent for analysis. Fingerprints lifted from the bag matched Gina's, corroborating their suspicions. She was taken to the police station, where Detective Phillips conducted the first interview. In her statement, Gina claimed the evening had spiralled out of control after her mother, who she said was intoxicated, burst into her bedroom while she was on the phone with her boyfriend Jack. According to Gina, Dorothy had been drinking heavily and began yelling and accusing her of disrespect. Gina recalled that her mother said, "We need to have this out now," insisting on a physical confrontation. Gina recounted Dorothy's unusual actions. She unbuttoned her shirt to avoid ruining it, as it had cost her $300. She then took off her rings and watch, and warned her daughter that she was going to beat her butt and show her who was in charge. Trying to avoid further escalation, Gina said she attempted to leave the bedroom and go downstairs. But Dorothy allegedly grabbed her arm near the top of the staircase, and in the struggle, both of them tumbled down the steps. Gina explained, "I was trying to get away from her and she kept grabbing my arms, doing this number and trying to hit me. She hit me in the back, my shoulder. She slapped me a couple of times." Gina claimed that in the next moment she saw that her mother was holding a knife. "I was terrified at that point because I just knew she was going to kill me," Gina told detectives. She said that she grabbed her mother's arm in an effort to wrestle the knife away. Gina continued, stating, "I jerked free of her and was backing up, and she just looked at me and said, 'One of us has to go,' and then she stabbed herself right in front of my eyes." Gina insisted that her mother's stab wound was self-inflicted, but Detective Phillips wasn't convinced. He'd been in the force long enough to know that the brutal head wounds Dorothy had sustained couldn't have been caused solely by a fall down the stairs. There were 13 gashes, some of which had penetrated the skull. Furthermore, the blade in Dorothy's knife had been thrust in so far that it was buried more than an inch into her spine. Then there was the blood-stained candlestick holder found stashed in Gina's closet, suggesting something far more sinister. Despite his doubts, Gina remained steadfast and she stuck to the same story. However, after some time she conceded that the struggle might have been a little more violent than she had originally suggested. She claimed that her mother had made threats against her boyfriend Jack, snarling, "I'm going to kill that little son of a bitch." After a couple of hours of back and forth, detectives told Gina what they had found in her bedroom and that the fingerprints on the bloody plastic bag were hers. Gina then broke down and changed her story of what had happened that night. She said that during the altercation with her mother, she had picked up the candlestick and suggested that it may have struck her head. She said she didn't mention it before because she was afraid she would be blamed for her mother's death. She stated, "The only thing I withheld from you was that, because I thought that you would think that I killed her, and I didn't. Everything else is true, I swear. I tried to get some of the blood up from everywhere. I did it because I didn't want to go to jail, because I didn't kill her." Gina's demeanour struck the detectives as strange. They later recollected that she was calm and cool. There was no sign of any emotion. Detective Phillips recalled, "If I hadn't been at the crime scene, I would have thought that she was very believable." Midway through the interrogation, Gina asked to go to the restroom. When she was informed that she would be accompanied by a female detective, she joked, "Don't worry, I don't have any body parts in my pocket." As the forensic analysis at the crime scene unfolded, detectives discovered an unexpected clue: an unidentified fingerprint on the handle of the knife. This led them to reconsider their theory of events. They wondered if Gina had an accomplice and thought back to what she said. She'd been on the phone with her boyfriend Jack Hook when the argument with her mother unfolded. Detectives suspected that he might have played a role in the murder and brought him in for questioning and fingerprinting. When his fingerprints matched those found at the crime scene, Jack was promptly charged as an accessory to murder after the fact. However, he strongly refuted that he had been at the home that night or had been involved in the murder and cover-up in any way. He said that he was over at the family's home almost every single night, and that his fingerprints were probably on every single knife inside the home. Following her own arrest and interrogation, Gina was transferred to the juvenile wing of Lexington County Jail, where she faced charges of murder. Psychological evaluation swiftly determined that she had been of sound mind at the time of the crime, and the brutal act appeared to be one committed in the heat of the moment. But as the shocking details emerged, the community struggled to make sense of the tragedy. The news of Dorothy's murder spread rapidly through Lexington, leaving the town in a state of disbelief. It was unthinkable that such a violent act could have been committed by Gina, a well-regarded teenager and model student at Lexington High School. Gina was known for her academic excellence. She was a freshman honour student, a player on the tennis team, and had even served as the president of the student body the previous year at Lexington Middle School. In the eyes of her teachers, classmates and community, Gina was the last person that anybody could expect to be involved in such a horrific crime. Cassie Grace, a classmate who had witnessed Gina and Jack's close relationship, expressed her disbelief, recalling, "They were always holding hands every day during classes, during breaks. They were just in love." For many, Gina's charm and positive attitude had made her an influential figure at school, and teachers believed that she was going somewhere in life. Charles Gatch, the principal of Lexington Middle School, captured the shared shock of the community when he said, "Gina was an outstanding leader and a positive student. Several times I would ask her opinions on things just to get the pulse of the students. For others, like fellow student Valerie Williams, the news simply didn't make sense. She said, "When I heard about it, I thought it was a different Gina Grant. I just couldn't believe it was the same Gina." But as the investigation continued, the community would soon come to learn that Gina and her family had been keeping a dark secret. To the outside world, Dorothy Mayfield appeared to have it all. 2 loving daughters, a stable marriage, and a tidy, well-kept home. But beneath the facade lay a much darker reality. Dorothy battled a long-standing alcohol addiction, which she hid from most people who knew her. Her behaviour at home was volatile, and a few individuals close to the family knew the truth. Gina's longtime babysitter, Norma Brown, witnessed the difference in Gina's demeanour around her mother. Gina seemed to walk on eggshells, always wary of Dorothy's drinking and quick temper. As news of the murder spread, close family members initially hesitated to disclose the painful realities of Dorothy's private life. But in the days that followed her death, pieces of the tragic puzzle began to surface. Dorothy had started drinking heavily after her husband, Charles's death in February of 1987. Charles had been an engineer who dabbled in real estate. He provided well for the family, moving them into a $270,000 home on Sunset Boulevard. Although Charles had passed away from cancer, Dorothy irrationally blamed her daughters for his illness. She forbade them from keeping his photograph or even mentioning his name. Soon after he died, she was admitted briefly to Charter Rivers Hospital, a facility for those struggling with substance abuse and emotional disorders. Yet her time here was brief, and her drinking resumed almost immediately upon her release. Dorothy's alcoholism permeated the family's life, nearly leading to disaster on several occasions. She held down a secretarial job at a local bank, but she was intoxicated almost every single night at home. Once, in a near-tragic incident, she passed out after leaving liquor bottles scattered across the home and almost set the house on fire. On another occasion, Gina threw away a handgun she had found underneath her mother's mattress. Dorothy's brother, Curtis Dixon, said that her drinking made her vicious. There were a few people that Gina confided in, including her friend Christy. Over the Labour Day weekend before the murder, Gina told Christy that she was afraid that her mother would one day kill her. Christy's mother had actually called the police, but was informed that nothing could be done unless something happened. The night that Dorothy died, her blood alcohol level was 0.30, perilously close to the potentially fatal threshold of 0.37. Throughout these years, Dana, who was 9 years older than Gina, tried to shield her younger sister from their mother's abusive behaviour. She kept the refrigerator stocked, drove Gina to and from school, and tried to ensure that Gina was never left alone in the home with her mother. Reflecting on those turbulent years, Dana shared, "We thought we had this terrible secret, but that secret had finally come spilling out." On the 3rd of November, both Gina Grant and Jack Hook were escorted to court, where a decision was to be made about their eligibility for bail. The prosecution presented photographs of Dorothy's skull, showing the brutal injury she had sustained and arguing that Gina posed a serious danger to others. Family members, however, painted a different picture of her, describing her as a straight-A student who would never harm anybody. Despite their support, family court judge Mark Westbrook ruled that Gina was indeed a threat and ordered her continued confinement. The case remained static until the 22nd of January, when Gina returned to court and a plea agreement was announced. Prosecutors agreed to drop the murder charge in exchange for Gina's admission to killing her mother, and she pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter. Her defence attorney, Jack Swerling, argued that the act was the result of years of emotional abuse and manipulation by Dorothy. He stated, It's a situation where the problems took their toll. A lot of weight was put on Gina's head. What came up was built-up anger. Jack Hook also pleaded no contest, this time to the charge of being an accessory to voluntary manslaughter. Although his attorney, Stephen McCormick, insisted that Jack had no part in either the murder or the attempt to stage it, the prosecution alleged otherwise. They argued that Jack went to Gina's home after the murder and inserted the knife into Dorothy's neck to make it look like a suicide. They also contended that Jack and Gina's relationship had been a major source of conflict between Gina and her mother. They said that Jack frequently snuck into Gina's room at night and hid in her closet. Following the pleas, Judge Frank Rogers ordered the State Department of Youth Services to complete pre-sentencing reports, moving the case one step closer to its final resolution. On the 1st of March, Jack Hook's sentencing arrived and his parents made an emotional plea for leniency. Sheila, his mother, shared that she and her estranged husband bore some responsibility for Jack's actions. She said that they had allowed him freedoms that they now regretted. She spoke softly in court, expressing her desire for Jack to return home, stating, "He had a lot of freedom before this. I feel he needs better control. Yes, I would like for him to come home." However, psychologist Laura Cato's testimony painted a far more concerning picture. She said that Jack had refused to accept blame for his role in the murder. She said to the courtroom, "He's been given previous chances and he chose not to take advantage of them. He appears pretty impulsive and exercises extremely poor judgment. It was a serious offence and there needs to be consequences." Judge Rogers agreed, stating the seriousness of Jack's offences couldn't be ignored. He then sentenced Jack to an indeterminate term with the State Department of Youth Services, with a guideline of 4 to 7 months but not to exceed his 21st birthday. Before concluding, the judge acknowledged the sadness of the case, stating, "This is a sad case. It was a gruesome and brutal killing. This young man has a lot of potential, but he has a lot to overcome." Jack simply replied, "Thank you." The next week it was Gina's turn to face her sentencing. She entered the courtroom with her sister Dana by her side and was visibly emotional. Dana had been Gina's staunchest supporter, corroborating her claims about their mother's abusive behaviour during her alcohol-fuelled rages. The judge, Mark Westbrook, showed leniency in Gina's case. He ruled that Gina couldn't be kept in the State Department of Youth Services facility for more than 6 months, provided she enrolled in a special programme for juvenile offenders. If she was unable to secure a place in the programme, she could be confined until the age of 21. Gina expressed her gratitude for the lenient sentence, stating, "I feel like I have a lot to deal with, but eventually, I'll be able to cope with it." She shared her hopes of moving in with her aunt and uncle in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and envisioned a fresh start. Her dreams included becoming a psychologist or lawyer, and perhaps one day writing a book about her experiences. She also hoped to counsel children who grew up with alcoholic parents, stating, "It's been hard for me to go through, but I've gotten a lot of support from my family, friends, and the community. I couldn't have made it without the support." Just a week after Gina and Jack began serving their sentences, the State Board of Juvenile Parole and the Department of Youth Justice contested Gina's sentence. They argued that the terms set by the judge were unlawful. Under state law, judges are required to impose sentences allowing juvenile offenders to be confined until they turn 21, similar to Jack's sentencing. In fact, state Supreme Court rulings from 1976 and 1978 emphasised that only the parole board could determine when a juvenile offender might return to the community. Marlene McLean, the board's chairwoman, explained the board's concerns, stating, "Our appeal is mainly based on a concern that this could set a precedent. We also want to ensure that all children are treated equally." Under these guidelines, Gina would have to serve a 1.5 to 4 year sentence, with reviews every 3 months to assess her eligibility for release. Following the legal back and forth, a decision was announced in September. allowing Gina to be moved to a juvenile correctional facility in Massachusetts to be closer to her aunt and uncle. This decision brought her closer to the family members who had supported her throughout her legal ordeal. Reflecting on the transition, Gina was relieved and hopeful, stating, "I felt like they'd send me one day, but I just never really knew it would be today." While at the facility, Gina disclosed that she had been experiencing recurring nightmares about her mother's murder, a trauma that continued to haunt her. She found some comfort, however, in the friendship she developed with the other girls at the facility. Speaking about her life at home, she described the tense environment, stating, "My goal was just to get through high school and get out of that house. In that house, it just felt like this tension was building and building." When Gina was eventually released a few months later, she moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts to live with her aunt and uncle. By 1992, she had enrolled at Cambridge Ringe and Latin High School, where she excelled academically, maintaining impressive grades that reflected her focus and dedication to starting a new life. Gina lived with her aunt and uncle until she turned 16 years old, when she decided to move into her own apartment. According to her aunt and uncle, Gina was fiercely independent, and she didn't want to live under the control of others. They described her as very mature for her age, intelligent and deeply self-sufficient. Her lifestyle, including her active sexual life, occasionally caused friction with her relatives, but Gina was determined to make her own way. Financially, she was supported by a modest trust fund of $269,000, an inheritance that had been divided between her and her sister Dana. However, Dana insisted that her younger sister receive the full amount. In April of 1995, Gina Grant's story captured the headlines once more after the prestigious Harvard University rescinded her admission offer. On paper, Gina seemed like the perfect candidate for any top-tier institution. With an IQ of 150, her status as a National Honor Society member, and her dedication to tutoring underprivileged children, Gina had already achieved impressive accomplishments. Her application to the university had been so outstanding that Harvard initially offered her early admission, an honour reserved for only the most exceptional young scholars. But following their offer, Harvard learned about Gina's past and made the controversial decision to withdraw her acceptance. This came on the heels of Gina's feature in an article in the Boston Globe, which celebrated her resilience and academic success despite a turbulent childhood with alcoholic parents. The article emphasised her achievements and featured Gina's refusal to speak about her mother's death, stating that it was too painful to recount. She didn't mention once that she had killed her. She expressed a sense of forward-looking determination, telling the reporter, "I certainly have goals that keep me focused. I have hobbies, play tennis, read a great deal. That certainly prevents self-pity, which is a dangerous thing. It seems to lead into a cycle of non-action. It's true that you can acknowledge that bad things happen and that things are awful, but to feel I'm a victim, that's just not good." However, following the article's publication, Harvard received an anonymous letter containing newspaper clippings from the case involving Gina's mother's death. The revelation shocked the admissions board, and Harvard's decision to retract its offer delivered a devastating blow to Gina. Addressing the setback, she said, "I deal with this tragedy every day on a personal level. It serves no good purpose for anyone else to dredge up the pain of my childhood. I'm especially distressed that my college career may now be in jeopardy." Although Harvard's application asks whether an applicant has ever been on probation, Gina's attorney, Margaret Burnham, argued that she was not legally required to disclose details of an incident that occurred when she was a juvenile. Her former attorney, Jack Swerling, also expressed his disappointment in Harvard's decision, stating, "I was upset for Gina because I knew she had worked day and night to put the past behind her and achieve her goals. She is someone who can make a significant contribution to society." Family members also rallied to Gina's defence, with her uncle Curtis asserting, "Gina's never been punished, not at all. But she didn't deserve to be punished. She's always been a model person. She just had to overcome a tragedy. The situation stirred a fierce debate, with critics questioning whether Gina's achievements should be enough to overlook her history, while supporters argued that she deserved a fresh start after enduring such hardship and successfully rebuilding her life. The case became a lightning rod for discussions about second chances, redemption, and the weight that one's past should carry in shaping their future. Yet despite the support that Gina received from friends and family, not everybody was convinced that her past was truly behind her. Marlene McLean, the chairwoman of the South Carolina Juvenile Parole Board, expressed concerns about Gina's failure to take full responsibility for her mother's death. This was a sentiment that was shared by many who questioned her remorse. Hu Eker, a former treatment supervisor at the State Department of Juvenile Justice, added, "We knew she needed to break through denial. It was never a question about her mind. It was about what was in her heart." Prosecutor Donnie Myers echoed this perspective, emphasising that true rehabilitation couldn't begin without remorse, which he felt was lacking. He stated, "Remorse was kind of non-existent on her part. It was a brutal crime." He added that while Gina was undeniably intelligent, being intelligent can indicate a little deviousness. Stephen McCormick, Jack Hook's former defence attorney, also felt that Gina received lenient treatment. He said, "She hasn't learned a thing. The system supported her in not taking any responsibility for what she's done. She's got a great deal, and the public gave her that deal." McCormack highlighted the disparity in sentencing, revealing that Jack had served twice as long as Gina and that the legal system had affected him deeply. Upon release, Jack had reconnected with former peers from juvenile detention, and he soon found himself back in prison for burglary. Reflecting on his son's troubled life, Jack's father Fred commented, "Seems that's the way his luck's been running ever since that night." As the case gained more and more media attention, Lexington Sheriff James Mett, who had been involved in the investigation, voiced his disappointment that Gina hadn't been tried as an adult. He argued that if an older person had killed Dorothy, there would have been no discussion about their future, because that person would be in prison doing life or sitting on death row waiting to be executed, he stated. Due to the lack of a trial, many details of Gina and Jack's case had remained undisclosed. However, Prosecutor Myers now revealed that around a month before her mother's death, Gina had fabricated a story about being kidnapped, a claim that he intended to use as evidence had the case gone to trial. According to Gina's report, a man abducted her from a football field and drove her around for 6 hours. But police quickly dismissed the story, suspecting instead that she had actually been out with her boyfriend Jack. Prosecutor Myers argued, "No one will ever convince me that the killing wasn't because of that boyfriend. They said emotional abuse, that her mother was constantly on her. Well, goddamn, her mother was on her to keep away from that boy." In Gina's defence, however, attorney Jack Swerling said that he dismissed the relevance of the kidnapping story. He said that clearly the judge didn't believe it either, since he handed down a very lenient sentence. The Harvard controversy raged on, with a group of students rallying behind Gina and demanding her acceptance. Daniel Cohen remarked, "The story here is more than the admission of one girl to Harvard. It's a story about what does the juvenile system mean? Is it a system to punish or rehabilitate?" Eventually, the Harvard Crimson revealed additional information about Gina's application, claiming that she had lied about the circumstances of her parents' deaths. When asked about becoming an orphan at 14, Gina reportedly said that her mother had died in a car accident. However, Gina's attorney, Margaret Burnham, denied these claims, insisting that Gina had never lied to any interviewer and accused the newspaper of tarnishing her reputation. She said, "After having done the wrong thing by rejecting her, the university now is trying to cover up its tracks by throwing dirt in her direction." The following month, Jack Hook permitted an interview with the Boston Herald from behind bars. He expressed that he couldn't return to life as it had been before. I was no longer Jack Hook. I was the shadow of Gina Grant, he said. He revealed that after his arrest, Gina was prepared to testify that it was actually him who had killed Dorothy. Gina had given 3 different versions of her mother's death and had finally told detectives that it was actually Jack who was responsible. She said that while she was fighting with her mother, Jack had come in through the back door. Her mother had picked up a knife, and she was waving it just a few inches away from Gina's face. Gina had said to detectives, "I was just trying to make her drop it, and I was still yelling, and I saw him run off into the den area and then come back. I remember seeing his hand raised with the crystal thing, the candlestick, in his hand. I saw him hit her once in the back of the head, and then I just turned away." However, Gina seemingly had a change of heart weeks later. She said that she blamed Jack at the advice of her defence attorney, who suggested that she do so to avoid prison. During his interview from behind bars, Jack sounded bitter as he said, "For her to say I'd done it, there must be something wrong. I don't know. I reckon I was in love with her. I was young. I was confused." He questioned why, if the abuse was so severe, Dana hadn't told someone or gotten herself and her sister out of the home. After their arrest, Jack never heard from Gina again, although he had held out hope that one day she would reach out to him. He wanted an explanation of what had happened and how he became entangled in it, but that explanation never came. While Gina may not have gotten into Harvard, she was eventually accepted by Tufts University. The school stated, "She paid her penalty. That's supposed to be enough under our system." Yet even as she moved forward with her life, opinions on Gina remained deeply divided. Some viewed her as a product of her circumstances, deserving of a second chance, while others saw her as somebody who had escaped justice. As Gina stepped into a new chapter, the shadows of her past lingered, leaving many to ponder the complexities of accountability, rehabilitation, and the choices that define us. Well, besties, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my newest supporter up on Patreon, Candice. The link to Patreon is in the show notes if you'd like to join, and you can join for as little as $1 a month. As y'all know, Morbidology is just a one-woman team, so the support up on there seriously goes such a long way, and I genuinely am eternally grateful. If you'd like to support the show in another way, please consider leaving me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you may be listening. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.